What is going on, everybody? What is going on? The Catch Fam, my name is John Dawson, and in today's video, we will be breaking down the 7 best waiver wire additions heading into week 6 of the 2023 fantasy football season. If you guys are new to the channel, this is all we do here all year round. Free fantasy football content, redraft, dynasty, and best balls. So if you guys are into that, be sure to subscribe on the way in. But more importantly, get in the comment section down below anything that you guys need in regards to the 2023 fantasy football season. Let me know. I'll get back to you as soon as I possibly can. Without further ado, let's not waste any more time. Let's hop into today's video. All right, first of all, I do want to mention that we have some injuries to the Chicago Bears backfield. So players like Roschon Johnson and Donta Foreman are definitely worth a look as they are rostered in a low percentage in leagues. But at the moment, Roschon Johnson, is a concussion protocol, so it's a little bit murky with what's going to happen, but we know that Khalil Herbert suffered an injury in that Thursday night matchup against Washington, so we want to monitor that situation, but I'm not as hard-pressed to go out and pick up one of these Chicago Bears running backs, but don't get me wrong, there's going to be opportunity for somebody in that backfield. I'm just not quite sure if Roschon Johnson's going to be ready this week or if Donta Foreman's the player we need to go pick up. So I do want to mention that those guys are definitely both worth a look. I also want to mention that Justice Hill got some opportunities for the Ravens in last week's matchup against the Steelers, but Gus Edwards still out-touched him. Justice Hill did make the most out of those opportunities by scoring a touchdown, but for me, man, year after year, the Ravens backfield is just an absolute nightmare for fantasy football. These players the snap count changes every week. We don't really know who the lead back is ever. So I'm not too crazy about going up and picking up Justice Hill because I don't know if the snap count is going to be consistent on a weekly basis. But don't get me wrong, in the right situation, in the right leagues, he is worth a waiver wire addition this week as well. All right, first on our list, we've got Amari DeMarcado of the Arizona Cardinals, who stepped up in the absence of James Conner, who suffered an injury in last week's matchup against the Bengals. And it is a knee injury, so we know at the running back position, that probably means that Conner is going to miss a little bit of times. Ricardo absolutely stepped up, 12.7 fantasy points off of 10 touches, 45 rushing yards, a touchdown, and added 1 reception on top of that. Not the best matchup in the world in week 6 against the LA Rams, but it's a good enough matchup. And if he remains the lead back in week 7, he gets a phenomenal matchup against the Seattle Seahawks. Nonetheless, this is the RB1 for the Cardinals at the moment, and we know that brings fantasy value, and he made the most out of his touches last week. And like I said, he even scored a touchdown. So DeMarcado, maybe a short-term solution, but you never know what could happen. You look at what, McLaughlin was able to do for the Broncos last week. He looks better than Javonte Williams. I don't know if DeMarcado is going to look better than James Conner, but he's absolutely worth a pickup for his handcuff value and his short-term value as we approach week 6. All right, next up, we've got Taj Spears sitting at 36% rostered, according to the Sleeper app. So he's been a player that we've talked about in terms of handcuff value for the past couple of weeks. But man, kind of seen him going back and forth with Derrick Henry and with the touches and everything. His touches have been going up each week. And in week 5, he absolutely performed against the Indianapolis Colts. Just 7 touches, but 34 rushing yards, a touchdown. He added 4 receptions for 35 receiving yards, 16.9 fantasy points. If you have Spears on your bench, if you were forced to play him last week, feeling pretty good right now. Don't get me wrong, Derrick Henry's the guy here. We all know that. But Spears is just hard to keep off of the field, and his touches are only going to increase as the weeks continue to go. So, it's a tough matchup going into week 6 against Baltimore, and then the Titans get a bye week in week 7. But man, his handcuff value is through the roof right now, and he has some standalone value. So if Spears is available in your league, he's absolutely, in my opinion, the best long-term running back at the moment on the waiver wire that you can go ahead and add. So if he's out there, like I said, just 36% rostered, Spears is definitely worth a add approaching week 6. All right, next up, we've got Rashid Rice of the Kansas City Chiefs sitting at 48% rostered, a player that I've talked about a lot the past couple of weeks, a player that made the must-start wide receiver video last week going up against the Minnesota Vikings. I love this matchup. Told you guys if you were in a pickle, he's a great start. Your flex position was hurting. Whatever it may be, Rashid Rice felt like he was going to have some really good opportunities against such a bad secondary in the Minnesota Vikings. He's led this Chiefs teams in targets and receptions amongst the wide receiver position. Just 5 targets last week, but 4 receptions, 33 receiving yards, and a touchdown. I mean, it just kind of feels like that chemistry is starting to brew with Patrick Mahomes Gets another good matchup this week in the Denver Broncos, and the following week, another good matchup against the LA Chargers. Two important games for the Chiefs being divisional opponents. So I like Rashid Rice. I've talked about him a lot in the past couple of weeks, and I like him going into week 6. So he's going to be a player that we can plug into the flex. Might not have the highest ceiling just due to the nature of the Chiefs offense, but man, if Rice is available, if you're hurting at wide receiver, he needs to be added moving into week 6. All right, next up, we're talking about Josh Reynolds, and quite frankly, I can't believe we're talking about Josh Reynolds. And for these videos, I try to avoid players that are rostered in more than 50% of leagues. He's sitting at 53% rostered, but I'm going to keep this one short. If Josh Reynolds is available in your league, especially 12 teams or more, like Josh Reynolds needs to be rostered, okay? Made the most of his opportunities against Carolina in week 5 with Amon-Ra St. Brown out. I mean, Reynolds and Goff, I've talked about this so much this season and even last year, right? They have chemistry going back to their days with the Rams, and it just shows on a weekly basis. And man, even if Amon-Ra is healthy, Josh Reynolds is the clear-cut number 2 wide receiver on this team. I mean, I know last week was J-Mo's first week back, but he is a boomer bust guy. He's going to take the top off the defenses. He's their big play guy. Reynolds is a solid wide receiver too. He's going to continue to be, and I get that he got dropped in a lot of leagues because of the goose egg in week 3, but let's not be too scared of that. It was 1 week. If you look at every other week, he's had 9.9 or more fantasy points. If you take away that 9.9 performance against Green Bay, which let's face it, for most of that game, the Lions were blowing out the Packers through the run game anyways. If we take away that game, 12 or more fantasy points in every game. Okay, outside of the goose egg. But you guys get what I'm saying. Josh Reynolds has been productive enough. This Lions offense is legit. Reynolds needs to be rostered. Even if he's just a player who's on your bench, you don't want your league mates to have him because he's going to have some weeks where he can go off. He's a solid flex option. Get him on your roster as we approach week 6. All right, next up is Curtis Samuel, who's still sitting at this 27% rostered. Let's look through the stat lines here. 11 points, 6 points, 7.4 points, 18.2 points, 18.5 points. He gets the Atlanta Falcons, the New York Giants, Philadelphia Eagles in the next 3 weeks. All pretty solid matchups. And I know Atlanta is a little bit stingy against wide receivers, but here's the advantage that Curtis Samuel has. Terry McLaurin's lining up. Jahan Dotton's lining up. Logan Thomas has some value lining up, and Gibson's catching the ball out of the backfield every now and then. I mean, Curtis Samuel is like the 3rd option in terms of receiving options for the Washington Commanders. And him and Sam Howell seem like they have a very good chemistry overall, and Howell likes to look his way. I mean, Curtis Samuel has been way more productive than Jahan Dotson for whatever reason. But man, we just have to pay attention to this. 18 or more fantasy points in the last 2 games. We can't ignore it. 2 of these next 3 matchups are extremely solid. Philadelphia's secondary has been awful. The Giants, I don't have to say anything. And like I said, even going up against a better defense like the Atlanta Falcons, does it really matter? No, they have to apply defensive pressure to the other wide receivers who are on this team. So Curtis Samuel, just 27% rostered. He is going to be another wide receiver that we can throw in the flex. There's going to be some inconsistency here, but man, he looks like he's been pretty consistent the last 2 weeks at least. He's definitely worth adding as we approach week 6. All right, back-to-back Washington Commanders. Didn't really envision this moving into week 6, but here we are. Logan Thomas coming off of a 20 fantasy point performance against the Chicago Bears. 11 targets, 9 receptions, 77 receiving yards, and a touchdown. So, don't get me wrong, Logan Thomas missed week 3, but other than that, by tight end standards, he's looked great. 8 points, 10 points, and 7 points in the other games that he's been healthy this year. He's the tight end 11 right now. The tight end position, just an absolute nightmare. Once again, in the 2023 season, it looks like Sam Howell and Logan Thomas also have a really good connection. So don't get me wrong. The Washington Commanders played the Chicago Bears last week. I get it. Some of you guys might be saying, like, I don't know. Like, they're coming off of playing against one of the worst defenses in the league. But I think there has been enough production for both Curtis Samuel and Logan Thomas. And at this point in the season, they need to be rostered, especially Logan Thomas, because like I said, the tight end position is just an absolute disaster right now. If you don't own Travis Kelce, essentially, just like last year. So Logan Thomas needs to be taken more seriously in more leagues. And I think this offense is just much different than what we've seen in the previous years with their new offensive coordinator coming from the team that Travis Kelce plays on. So I do like Logan Thomas. I do think he's worth picking up. He's in the top 12 right now at the position. He should be rostered moving into week 6. Usually I try to end these videos with one tight end and one quarterback, but I didn't really feel like there was any quarterbacks to talk about. But I do feel like there is a second tight end to talk about, and that's Dalton Schultz. We just talked about Logan Thomas being in the top 12 as he tight end 11. Dalton Schultz is your tight end 12 on the season so far. He's had more inconsistency, a lower ceiling, 2 points in week 1, 7 in week 2, 1.9 in week 3. That didn't feel great, right? But the last 2 weeks, 13.2 points in week 4, 19.5 in week 5. I do want to say he has a tough matchup in week 6 against the Saints. They've been one of the best defensive units against the tight end position. And then he has a bye week and another relatively tough matchup against the Carolina Panthers. But man, the production has been there in the last 2 weeks. And we know this Houston Texans team, under the rookie quarterback CJ Stroud, they're going to throw the football. That's what they want to do. And that means that Dalton Schultz is going to have production throughout the season. And we already talked about how much of a dumpster fire the tight end position is. Dalton Schultz should be worth consideration in full PPR leagues and especially in deeper leagues. There's going to be some inconsistency here, but guys, that's just the tight end position. I don't even want to linger on it too much, but we know that this offense is going to throw the football a ton. Like that's the most important aspect here. He's been productive in the last 2 weeks. And like I said, a couple of tough matchups coming up, so I like Logan Thomas a little bit more here, but Dalton Schultz absolutely needs to be considered moving into week 6. And that'll do it for today's video. If you guys did find the content helpful today, be sure to hit that subscribe button on the way out. This is all we do here all year round, free fantasy football content, redraft, dynasty, and best ball. If you guys have any questions, please get in the comment section down below. Anything that you guys need, start, sits, trades, waiver wire advice, roster reviews, whatever it is, please let me know. I'll get back to you guys as soon as I possibly can. And with that, I will say, thank you guys so much for watching and or listening. And remember, you saw it here on The Catch.